All right, so you've handed us a stack of research on education reform, and honestly, it's been quite a challenge
Yeah.
to dig through. But
To unpack, right?
it is. But, after really getting into it, there are some really interesting and honestly kind of surprising findings about what actually works in education, what really doesn't move the needle, and of course, where charter schools kind of fit into all of this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area of study,
Yeah.
especially I think when you start to realize that some of the things that we might assume are true about improving schools, kind of those initial assumptions we might have don't really hold up when you look at the research.
Totally. And I gotta say, I was pretty blown away by this one study that basically said just increasing school funding doesn't mean students are going to perform better.
Interesting.
Like, they even looked at things like, okay, what if you hire more certified teachers or teachers with more advanced degrees? And you know what? It was actually linked to slightly lower test score games. Can you believe that? It's like, you would think, common sense, more resources, better results, right?
Right, exactly.
But it turns out it's just way more complicated than that.
It really is. And, it highlights how important it is to be doing this kind of research. Because if we just rely on our gut feeling or what seems intuitive, we can be led down the wrong path. Like, it's not as simple as just throwing money at the problem.
Sure.
I mean, even when we're talking about, seemingly valuable resources like experienced teachers,
Right.
it's clear we need to look deeper at what's actually driving positive change in the classroom.
100%. And that's what I think makes some of these studies about charter schools so fascinating. Because we kept seeing across multiple studies that on average, charter schools are doing better than traditional public schools.
Interesting.
Particularly in math and reading. And this was especially true in low-income urban areas, which just makes you think, okay, what is going on here?
Yeah, that's a finding that really begs further examination. We have to ask ourselves, what are these charter schools doing differently? Are there practices they've implemented that are leading to these results? And if so, can we learn from those successes and figure out how to apply them more broadly? How can we use this information to improve the entire education system, not just one type of school?
And that's what's so great is that at least one of these studies actually dug into that question. They looked at 35 successful charter schools in New York City, and they found 5 key practices that were consistently linked to student success.
Okay, and what were those?
Well, it wasn't anything like fancy buildings or high-tech gadgets or anything like that, no. It was all about practical stuff, things any school could implement if they really committed to it.
Like what, for example?
So they talked about the importance of frequent teacher feedback, so students are getting that constant support, then using data to inform instruction so you know what's working and what's not. Then they were big on high-dosage tutoring, which makes sense. That extra help can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And then they emphasized increasing actual instructional time, so kids are spending more time actually learning. And maybe even more important than all of that, they talked about cultivating this culture of high expectations, like really believing in these kids and their potential. It's kind of like a recipe for success right there in those 5 practices.
And what's so exciting about these findings is that they really suggest it's not necessarily about being a charter school itself, It's about those effective teaching strategies being implemented consistently and with fidelity. And to me, that implies that these strategies can be transformative in any educational setting. So it's not about the type of school, but about the quality of teaching and the learning environment that's being created.
So that makes you wonder if those 5 key practices really are like the secret sauce. Can they actually be replicated in traditional public schools and get the same kind of success? Like, is it really about the practices themselves, or is there something else going on?
It's a great question, and I think the research really points to the answer being yes, they can be replicated.
Okay.
There's a really compelling study in the Stack about this large-scale effort in Houston where they took those 5 practices and they implemented them across 20 struggling public schools.
Oh, yeah. That's the one where they saw those huge gains in math scores, right? Especially for Black and Hispanic students. I remember that.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so compelling, right? They show that these practices aren't exclusive to the charter school model. They can work.
Right.
And they can work really well. With dedicated effort and a focus on these effective teaching strategies, traditional public schools can make some serious progress. And I think it's especially encouraging to see these gains happening for student populations that, have historically been underserved.
Totally. When I was reading that study, it was just, I don't know, it felt hopeful, like it really is possible to make a difference, even
Yeah.
in schools that are facing some really big challenges.
100%. And speaking of inspiring initiatives, I mean, the research you shared on the Harlem Children's Zone, that's another example that I found really, really fascinating
Yeah.
because it takes this really holistic approach to education reform. It's not just about the academics.
Oh man, that one really stuck with me. I mean, combining that rigorous academic program in their Promise Academy charter school
Yeah.
with this whole network of wraparound social services for both the students and their families.
It's incredible, and the impact is clear. 6 years in, the students who were randomly selected to attend Promise Academy, not only were they doing better academically with higher test scores and all that,
Right.
but they were also seeing these amazing improvements in other areas of their lives.
Yeah, like way lower teen pregnancy rates and even a reduction in male incarceration rates. Like those are some serious long-term benefits.
Absolutely.
It really makes you realize how interconnected everything is, right? Like education doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all.
It's tied to every other aspect of a child's life, their community.
It's about investing in the whole child and recognizing that a child's zip code shouldn't determine their destiny.
100%. 100%. Every child, no matter what their background is, they deserve the opportunity to thrive.
Absolutely. And while these 5 practices that we've been talking about, they offer this really powerful framework for improvement, some researchers have also been exploring the role of financial incentives in education. And that's yielded some pretty interesting, you could even say controversial, results.
Yeah, you're talking about those studies where they basically paid kids for getting good grades or reading books, right? I gotta be honest, when I first heard about that, I was like, wait, what? I mean, isn't the desire to learn, shouldn't that be enough?
Right? It's a fair point. And honestly, the research on this is far from conclusive.
Yeah.
Some studies did find these, kind of modest improvements in certain areas, like maybe test scores went up a little.
Okay.
But then others found no effect at all. And even more concerning, some studies suggested there might even be some negative impacts, especially for certain groups of students.
Like for Spanish-speaking students, if I'm remembering correctly. I feel like that's something we really have to be careful about, right? We don't want to create a system that's unintentionally disadvantaging certain kids.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this such an important area of ongoing research, right? Because we have to think about the potential consequences, good and bad, really carefully before implementing these kind of incentive programs. What works in one context might not work in another. And when it comes to education, one size fits all rarely applies. And I think even more importantly, this whole idea raises the question, are we just trying to incentivize better test scores?
Right.
Or are we trying to build a genuine love of learning? Those are 2 very different things.
Yeah, it's about fostering a love of learning that lasts, not just, compliance in the moment, right?
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that success in life, it goes way beyond just those standardized test scores. There are these essential skills that kids need that you can't really measure on a test.
You're talking about those non-cognitive skills, things like that.
Exactly. Things like perseverance, collaboration, communication, adaptability, critical thinking. Those are the skills that are really going to equip young people to navigate the complexities of the world, of work, of relationships.
And those are the things you can't just teach to a test, right? Which kind of makes you wonder, are we even focusing on the right things?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. It is. So, okay, if these 5 key practices that we keep coming back to, they're so effective at boosting not just those academic outcomes, but those essential life skills, too.
Yeah.
It begs the question, why aren't they being more widely implemented, especially in traditional public schools?
Yeah.
Like, if we know they work, why aren't we seeing them everywhere?
Right. And it's a complex issue. There are a lot of factors at play. We have to consider systemic barriers, limitations in resources, and these long-standing inequities that continue to impact the education system.
It's almost like we need to figure out how to, I don't know, bottle up all this knowledge about what actually works.
Right, like bottle it up and make it accessible to everyone.
Exactly. Make it so every school, every teacher can implement these practices, because it shouldn't be this elusive thing.
It's not just about having the recipe, though, right? It's about creating the right conditions for those ingredients to really come together. It takes support, professional development, and this real commitment to tackling those systemic inequities that hold so many schools back.
You've given us a lot to think about, that's for sure. I mean, we've seen how these really effective teaching practices, like those 5 key principles, they can be replicated in all kinds of schools. And it got me thinking, those incentive programs, they're interesting, but they also kind of make you wonder, Are we measuring the right things? Are standardized tests really telling us the whole story about whether a child is successful or not?
I think that's the key, right? Because we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this issue, it's so multifaceted.
Yeah.
But if there's one thing that's abundantly clear, it's that creating an education system that's truly equitable and effective, it requires all of us.
Right.
It's not just on teachers, it's not just on policymakers, it's on families, communities, everyone working together.
Totally, totally. It really is about all of us coming together to make sure that every single child, no matter where they come from, has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
100%. And, it's interesting because you ended on this thought-provoking question, which is, if we know these 5 key practices are so impactful, why aren't they the norm everywhere, especially in traditional public schools? Like, what's getting in the way?
I know. It's like we've uncovered this huge problem, but there's no easy answer, you know? Is it implicit bias in the system? Is it a lack of resources? Or is it just that we haven't prioritized these practices enough?
I don't know. But what I do know is it's a question that deserves our attention.
100%.
It deserves our curiosity. And most importantly, it deserves our commitment to finding solutions. Because, honestly, our kids deserve better.
They do. They deserve every chance to succeed.
They deserve an education system that truly is equitable, effective, and empowering.
And on that note, we're going to leave you with a little challenge. What can you do as a listener right now, today, to make a difference in your own community? Could you volunteer at a school, advocate for better funding, or even just start having more informed conversations about these issues? Because even those small actions, they can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of education. Until next time.